When the body of Kendrick Johnson was discovered at his high school gym, it was first thought by investigators to be an unfortunate accident. But when more details surrounding this mysterious incident came to light, Kendrick's parents became certain that this was no accident at all, and that their beloved son had met with something much more sinister. But before I get into the details of this story, we gotta make some blackberry cobbler. So I'm gonna take some blackberries, I'm gonna put them on a cast iron pan, and I'm gonna reduce them down. Blackberries are gonna go in, some coconut sugar, some lemon juice. So Kendrick Johnson was a student at Lowndes High School in Georgia. He was an athlete involved in track, football, and basketball. He was well-liked, smart, and the epitome of a team player. When you look up pictures of Kendrick, you can just tell he was a handsome and charming dude that beamed at you in every one of his yearbook photos. I'm also gonna be adding in some vanilla extract. Kendrick was a very talented athlete with a bright future ahead of him, but in January of 2013, his life would tragically be cut short in a truly horrific way. I know, sorry to crumble your cobbler, but you knew what you were in for when you clicked on this video. So with that in mind, let's back up moments before the crime so we can track Kendrick's final moments. So on January 9th was the first day back to school from Christmas break. That day, Kendrick was seen a few times on school surveillance camera footage that day. He was first spotted on one camera walking out of the cafeteria from lunch, but the last footage captured of him alive was him walking to the old gym. And that's what the students apparently called it, the old gymnasium. So this school had two gyms, an older one and a newer one that had just been built. This is actually an important detail because there's a lot of people seen entering the old gym throughout the day. Before we go any further with this, we have to get started on our crumble, which is a mixture of oat flour and butter. I'm gonna be adding in some baking soda, some salt, and some cinnamon. And then I'm gonna be adding in some coconut sugar. And then I'm gonna be adding in some soy milk. So the thing about this old gym is that once the new one had been built, it's kind of becomes a storage area for a lot of the students. There were a lot of lockers on the campus for sports, but they cost money to use and were apparently in a super inconvenient location. So it wasn't unusual for students to use the old gym as this drop-off point to store their shoes, backpacks, clothes, that sort of thing. I love how not only do they have to pay to be in extracurriculars like sports and stuff in high school, but they also have to pay for lockers just to store their crap. You know, because teenage high school students totally have the money to do that. I hate to say it, but if the lockers had been free to use, Kendrick could potentially still be alive today. But that's a big speculation. You'll understand why I said that in a second. The old gym had their typical bleachers and sports equipment, but it also had these gigantic blue floor mats that were used for gymnastics, tumbling, and wrestling. The giant blue mats were up to 6 feet long, and they were just kept rolled up and stood up in the corner of the gym as these giant cylinders. Because these things were in the back corner, that's typically where the students ended up throwing all their stuff. Well, hopefully it wasn't things of value, but the students said they could count on putting their sneakers and clothes in the back corner and it'd still be there in time for practice that day. And sometimes kids would wedge their shoes and books inside the mats, so it wasn't as obvious for people to find them. You see where this is going, don't you? I told you this was a bad one. So obviously this is what investigators assumed Kendrick was doing on the tapes when he left the cafeteria and entered the old gymnasium. Now, once Kendrick entered the gym, he turned right to head towards the mats and was never seen again. While that's sitting, I'm gonna clean up my mess. Kendrick was marked absent from all of his classes after lunch that day, but the teachers didn't think anything of it. When Kendrick didn't come home from school that day, his mother got worried, and at midnight she filed the missing persons report. The school helped and started printing missing person flyers and distributing them, and at this point, everyone thought that Kendrick had probably left campus before he went missing. They had no idea that Kendrick never left the school grounds that day. Now on January 11th, 2 students entered the gym for class at around 10 in the morning, and that's when they noticed 2 feet sticking out from one of the rolled up gym mats in the corner of the gym. Now at first, they thought it was just a prank. I would be really hoping it was a prank too. I really don't think my brain would be able to process or handle the alternative to what socks sticking out of a gym mat could actually mean. Oh gosh. Obviously the coach is like, what? And he just immediately started knocking over the mats to try to get to the one in the middle, which is where the girls said they saw the feet. When the coach knocked over one of the mats, Kendrick's books and 2 pairs of shoes fell onto the ground, and that's when the body was discovered. To this day, the way Kendrick's body was found made the detectives believe that what happened to Kendrick that day was just a pure accident. But for Kendrick's parents, when they hear about how their son was found, they are certain that someone had to put him there. Let's get into it. So Kendrick was found in the center of a mat that was tightly rolled and standing up. But because he was head first in the mat, that meant that he was stuck upside down and with his feet in the air, which is how the girls first noticed him. Kendrick's regular shoes that he'd been wearing were off of his feet and found rolled up in the mat with him, near his legs at the top. His gym shoes were found towards the bottom of the mat, just below his head. The detectives theorized that Kendrick went up to get his gym shoes from the mat when he somehow got himself accidentally wedged upside down without being able to get out, causing him to eventually run out of air. So I guess, medically speaking, if you are stuck in this position upside down for a few hours, I guess you can't survive it. After a while, when everything rushed to his head, you'll start to have trouble breathing and eventually suffocate after a few hours, which is just a downright horrible way to go. But this is just a theory, and detectives still haven't ruled out other possibilities yet, so now they have to do one of the nastiest things I could ever imagine having to do. They combed through every nook and cranny of the ancient high school gym. They seriously said they looked at every single hair and fingernail in those bleachers, as well as every speck of DNA in that gym for any potential evidence. I just can't get over the sticky floors that they probably just crawled on their hands and knees for. Ugh. High schoolers are absolutely disgusting. Like, trust me, I was one. Those brave investigators. Officials also questioned the students to try to figure out if any other explanation for the way Kendrick was discovered, as well as figure out who was the last person to have seen him. Someone had to know something. They eventually tracked down a student who shared the pair of gym shoes with Kendrick. This student said he and Kendrick shared the shoes, and instead of renting a locker, they would shove the shoes down inside the mat so they could both use them for their gym classes. This seemed like enough proof to support their theory, and 3 days later, an autopsy was performed, and they concluded the theory that Kendrick must have wedged himself inside the mat to reach the shoes, where he ended up getting stuck in that upside down position until he ran out of breath. As you can imagine, a lot of people did not really agree with this conclusion, and I also have a hard time believing that this when I look at that itty bitty opening in the mat. Photos of the mat Kendrick was found in are online, and when you look at the spot he was wedged in, it's kind of hard to imagine a muscular athlete like Kendrick would have chose to dive head first for a pair of shoes at the bottom. Sure, the mats were close to 100 pounds, but that should have been easier for the 5'10" athlete to move as opposed to shimmying down the inside of the tiny opening, right? This opening was only 17 inches across. I mean, a lot of people, including Kendrick's parents, think Kendrick's body was placed there and that he was met with foul play and an unknown suspect rolled him inside the mat in an attempt to hide the evidence. But at that point, Kendrick's case was officially closed after being ruled out a tragic accident. As you can imagine, Kendrick's parents were livid. They really laid into the school administration and called them out, saying even with all the cameras around, they still couldn't manage to keep their son safe. And now that they've declared it as an accident, after only 3 days of investigating, they believe the investigation ended way too soon, and in April of that year, they did a huge media push to try to reopen Kendrick's case. And now that my berries have reduced down, I'm gonna add my oatmeal crumble right on top. His parents even locked arms in front of the entrance of the county courthouse and got arrested for civil disobedience. And now my favorite part, for more crumble to go on top of our cobbler. I mean, I get it. They felt absolutely betrayed by the investigators for how quickly this case was closed. They lost their son. So what else did they have to lose? They wanted answers and they wanted justice. I want answers and I want justice. The family wasn't just unable to accept the fact that Kendrick was gone and needed to put the blame on someone. They legit had reasons as to why the Johnson family believed that this wasn't an accident, but just a cover-up. When paramedics first arrived on the scene, they said that they noticed a bruise on Kendrick's right jaw, but it wasn't mentioned in the autopsy report. Something else that struck them as odd was the amount of time it took for the school to turn the surveillance tapes over to the officers, and also the fact that there was footage missing. They knew that Kendrick entered the gym around 1:09 in the afternoon, but around 12 in the afternoon, a lot of the cameras had randomly just stopped recording and then started recording again around 5 to 6 minutes after he had entered the gym. So you know pretty much the key moment that would have answered all the questions for us. Was it a glitch or was it someone trying to cover something up? The school reported that the cameras did this because they were motion activated and that they would only turn on and start recording if they detected movement, but they weren't always 100% reliable, which was either a convenient coincidence for the suspect of a crime or a tragic happenstance for the victim of an accident. And now that our crumble has covered our blackberries, we're gonna throw it right into our oven. The Johnson family felt as if their son's case had been completely botched and that their school officials did not do much to help. It seemed like they were just trying to wash their hands of it and be done with it, so they launched their own investigation. and that's when the case would get even more disturbing. The examiner said the official cause of death of Kendrick Johnson was blunt force trauma to the right side of his neck, right around where the paramedics had said they first seen the bruising. Y'all, I told you guys that this is gonna be a wild one. With this new piece of evidence on their side, the family was now able to push back on the accidental ruling. So by October of 2013, there were multiple independent investigations that had been started to look into Kendrick Johnson's case. The Lowndes PD was pretty much set on the fact that this was an accident, and independent investigators and organizations were starting to come to the same conclusion that when they weren't able to find any more evidence to support premeditation. But the Johnson family refused to take this as an answer, as did a lot of people across the country who had been following the case. So the Johnsons started renaming names. Oh no, they didn't. First, they named two brothers, Brian and Brandon Bell. They believe that the two got into a scuffle with Kendrick and are the ones behind it all. They said that all three boys have had some fights in the past and thought that they could be Kendrick's potential enemies. But I guess, according to classmates and friends, Kendrick and Brian had recently decided to resolve their differences and bury the hatchet. More like bury the cobbler. The Johnsons claimed the Bell boys and Kendrick had gotten into a heated fight around a year ago, and that memory had always stuck out to them, so they wanted the brothers looked into. And I'll admit, guys, I go back and forth on this case so much myself, and it might seem like at this point the parents are just needing a scapegoat to blame. But when I found out who the Bell brothers' dad was, it put a whole new perspective on the case for me. Because the Bell brothers' dad, well, he was an FBI agent. So that immediately caused more conspiracy theories about a cover-up. But authorities were able to prove that one of the brothers was seen on video in class at the time, and the other had left earlier that day on a bus around noon to go to a wrestling match. But the family pressed forward regardless, and even took to social media and named the Bell boys as the perpetrators of the crime. I'm getting my cobbler out of the oven. These are kids, not even adults yet. I'm not sure posting their full names was the move, but also I can't possibly imagine the lengths I'd go as a parent in this situation. They also brought up the fact that there were inconsistencies with the surveillance footage and claimed it had been edited due to the missing time from when Kendrick entered the gym. The family filed a lot of lawsuits, but the issue was all of their claims couldn't be supported by evidence, so the lawsuits would be dropped quite often. Then a third autopsy was published. This one detailed that the blunt force trauma that struck Kendrick in the neck was from a 45-pound object like a weight or a dumbbell. So now we've got some conflicting autopsies, semi-suspected suspects, and no new answers. It seemed as each year passed, we would never get closure in this mindfuck of a case. Until now. Because 8 years after Kendrick's body was discovered in the mat, his investigation is officially being reopened this year. That's right, in March of 2021, it was announced that 17 boxes of evidence on Kendrick's case would be opened back up and scrutinized closely, and Kendrick's family said that they cling to the hope that they can finally get some answers for their beloved son. Let me add some Cool Whip. Guys, I told you that this one was nuts. Now, what I would give to know Kendrick's final moments in that gym, it really is one of those that just keeps you up at night. No matter which way you slice this blackberry cobbler, be it an accident or foul play, it's just a straight up tragedy. I don't know about you guys, but I will be watching the news for anything that might come out of this year's investigation. May the investigators finally find what they're looking for, and may your cobbler crust be consistently crispy. Thanks for watching, my friends.